so, well, what are these new ways of thinking? Well, I mean, the key idea, the key concept is Renaissance humanism. And humanism is basically looking back at ancient sources as a model. And so the Renaissance thinkers will look back to the Greeks and the Romans, and they'll look back at these actual sources. What they wrote, how they wrote it, what they depicted and how they depicted it in art. The emotions and the ideas and the values that are seen back in Greek and Roman times are now reestablished. They're reconsidered. And they will be seen, these ideas and these values will now be seen in the writers of the Renaissance period. So humanism, once again, is looking back to ancient Greek and Roman sources as an inspiration and a model for how to think, for how to look at the world. Question?
How did that start to happen, this kind of humanist thought?
Well, I mean, this is one of those, it's a phenomenon. Why does it happen, right? Historians all, wonder, well, why in Florence are there suddenly all these geniuses over this century? That contribute so much to what's now Western civilization. There's a couple factors, right? Italy is the center of trade because of its proximity to the Mediterranean and to the eastern trade routes with the Arabs. So it has a lot of wealth. And as we note throughout this course, wealth begets learning and artistic innovation. Because when you have money to sit around and learn and paint. And so these wealthy people, these sort of merchants, will be patrons of education and learning. Now, what's interesting is that, well, what's unique is these people with wealth in Italy are not necessarily going to want to use that wealth. They're going to want to use that wealth to enjoy life here in the world. And so many of them are not really interested in the pious sort of expectations that the church lays out about fasting and about giving everything to the poor and about doing these things that are during the Middle Ages considered ideal, right? The sort of pious attitudes and behaviors that are expected from people during the Middle Age. And so you see many wealthy merchants who want to spend their money and enjoy the world. And so they find in Renaissance, they find in the ancient Greeks and Romans a different way of thinking, a way that embraces individual pursuits, a way that embraces looking at the world not through religious lens, through this moral lens, but looking at the world as a place that should be studied and learned and enjoyed while you're in the world. So, to answer the question, it's hard to know, well, why Italy? And it's a phenomenon. But we can say that there's a lot of wealth in the hands of people that want to use that wealth to enjoy the world. And so therefore, they're open to these ideas. Now, a second related thing is that because of the increasing wealth in Italy, there is the ability to access the knowledge that's in the East, in the Byzantine Empire, amongst the Arabs. There's more interest in what's been lost during the Middle Ages. And so this is a gradual thing. The Renaissance does not happen suddenly, right? We begin looking at 1450, but many historians trace the Renaissance back to the 1300s, in the beginning of the 1300s, right after the initial phases of the Black Death. So this is a long period of gradual change, but what we see during it is this movement which focuses more on ancient Greek sources. And two related things as part of humanism, the other terms, are secularism and individualism. So these are aspects of this humanistic thought. Okay? Secularism basically suggests that humans should look at the world as it is, not through this religious lens, and therefore should attempt to understand the world and to achieve things within the world. So secularism says the point is not only to get into the afterlife, but to enjoy aspects of this world. And individualism is linked to that, of course. If you're enjoying things in this world, there's this idea that the individual can do much. The individual can learn, the individual can achieve here in this world. And so individualism suggests that one can be a Renaissance man, a well-rounded, well-read person, someone that can do multiple things, can paint and can read ancient manuscripts, and can have conversations and have good rhetoric. The types of learning that will be a part of the Renaissance education, it will revive sort of ancient ways of learning, right? Classes on rhetoric, on speech, and new focuses in writing on human emotions. The writing during the Middle Ages is mainly focused on theology, and also there's sort of ancient sort of legends and tales like Beowulf. But we don't see those intimate character studies that become a part of literature after the Renaissance, sort of focusing on the thoughts and emotions and desires and needs of individual characters. So some historians argue that basically literature as we know it today, begins with the Renaissance. This focus on individuals as they are, humans with their needs and their thoughts. It's no surprise that one of the types of sonnets that we use in the English language today comes from the Renaissance. Petrarch, one of the early humanist thinkers. And Petrarch writes these sonnets, these basically rhymed poems that express human emotion about these different things, and also are beautiful sounding. The Latin of the Middle Ages had become very bookish because it wasn't focused on trying to capture beauty or trying to capture emotions. Instead, it was focused on theology, science, math, these sort of more technical things. And so the Latin language of the Middle Ages, many Renaissance thinkers look back to the ancient Latin and they see this more beautiful, flowing language, and there's an attempt to try to replicate that in the writings of this time. And also to get away from the bookish Latin of the Middle Ages, many people begin to turn to the vernacular, and they begin to write in languages that are spoken in that area. We noted Dante, who precedes the Renaissance, sort of a late Middle-aged thinker, sort of right at that turning point. Dante writes his Inferno, or the Divine Comedy, of which one section is the Inferno, then the Purgatorio and Paradiso. He writes that in Italian, the Florentine dialect. And in England, we see also English being used more, like in the writings of Chaucer.